Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard. My name is Paul Geiger. I am a public speaking coach and presentation expert out of New York City. The topic for today is speaking with confidence when the stakes are high. And let's be honest, in business, the stakes are always high. The reason for that, I believe, is because we all have the same goal. No matter if you're promoting yourself or your ideas or your products or your services, you really want to gain one result, and that is persuasion. But in order to get someone to a place of persuasion, you first have to get them to a place where they trust you. But that won't happen until they recognize that you are speaking authentically, that you're speaking with a sense of commitment to your words. Once that occurs, the process of being in a place of trust begins, which ultimately will lead to the persuasion. So, what is standing in the way? In my years of coaching, I have found that the major obstacles really just boil down to two things. You're either dealing with the fear or you need to be more clear. I understand that everybody feels a little bit of both when they have to get up and speak in front of people. But let's just take a little informal poll to see what your preference is. Which one has more of an impact on you? Is it, number one, dealing with the fear? Or number two, being more clear? So when I say deal with the fear, what I'm talking about is public speaking anxiety. That nervous feeling that you feel minutes, hours, days, possibly even weeks before you have to give a big presentation. Is that what gets in your way? Is that what causes you to not be able to present at your best and present with confidence? Or is it being more clear? Is it that feeling of not connecting with your audience? Perhaps that they lose interest too early? The fact that you feel like you're circling around the topic but can't really nail it down? Is it being more clear that's giving you the most trouble? I can see our polls are coming in now. The answers, we've definitely got a little bit of both. And it looks like everyone is just about has sent in their preference, either deal with the fear or be more clear. And as usual, the number twos are the winners. Be more clear. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It really comes as no surprise that some people don't want to admit that they have a fear of public speaking, that they have nervousness or any kind of public speaking anxiety. They don't want to admit it to themselves, and they certainly don't want to admit it to others. Then again, some individuals may not even be aware of the effect that those forces are having on them. And trust me, even the people that you believe are immune to it, they're not. They have to deal with it just like you do. So we're going to talk about, number one, what it feels like, number two, why it happens, and then number three, what you can do about it. So use your imaginations for just a moment. Imagine that the roles here are reversed, that this is actually your big presentation day. You're the expert. You've taken on the obligation of delivering this information to an audience of either your peers, your superiors, or even strangers, or a combination of all of those. So, you know your material, you know the content, you know what you're going to talk about. Imagine for a moment that the individuals are making their way into the room, or into the Zoom. They're beginning to settle in. Things are starting to happen. Let me help out your imaginations just a little bit. Well, here we have a nice eager crowd of listeners awaiting to hear what it is that you want to inform them about, to find out what it is that you want to convey. What is your message that you want to get across? So suddenly you become aware that you're in it. You're in what I call the vacuum of silence, when you suddenly recognize that there's no one else who's going to paddle the boat. You're the only one driving things forward. It is your obligation. So suddenly, this eager, even amiable crowd of individuals who are awaiting what it is you have to say, suddenly to you, they appear to be much more like this. Now, why do we have this sort of response to public speaking? You start to feel your heartbeat increase. You may feel your knees getting a little shaky. Your voice might get a little shaky. Your palms might start to sweat. In fact, sweating might be something that you're experiencing up to that moment and while you're in that moment. You're having what we call a fight or flight response. And the reason that you feel this way in the opening moments of public speaking is because the part of your brain that processes whether you are in danger or not gets to your brain, hits the synapses a lot faster than your logical mind. Therefore, the behavior that you always experience is going to continue to repeat. So what are some of the triggers that cause this fight or flight response? Well, there are three, and they are apparent and they exist in every public speaking scenario. And by the way, every business communication scenario is a public speaking scenario. So these forces have to be dealt with. They are the energy of attention, the sense of judgment, and the fear of consequences. The reason I put them all here on the screen at once is because you experience them all together, all at once. It can be a very, very powerful experience. In order to be able to deal with it appropriately, we need to take a look at each one separately. The first is what I refer to as the energy of attention. And I know you know what this feeling is like. Even when you're in a one-on-one conversation with someone and they're listening to you, you feel the energy of their attention. When the roles reverse and you're listening to them, they feel your energy of attention. We all feel it. No one is immune. As soon as you begin to increase the numbers of people or raise the stakes or the importance of the conversation, suddenly that energy coming towards you begins to increase. And that is what you're feeling. That is what is triggering the fight or flight response. Now, I give names to things because I believe that once you're able to name it, it becomes a little less fearful. It becomes a little less of the unknown. Because in these circumstances, as I said, no one's immune to the energy of attention. It's like the weather. You cannot deny it. If it's raining outside, you can't say that it's not. Whenever people are listening to you, this energy is present. And being able to say, there's the energy of attention, or even better, I know the energy of attention is coming, is really a step toward you becoming more confident and being able to mitigate some of those physical responses that we talked about just a moment ago. Some of those real physical responses. It's about behavior. It begins with awareness, but eventually it's going to be about changing your behavior. So then we go from the energy of attention, which is actually a trigger, because it will trigger the next two. The second one that we feel in this ball of nervousness that most people refer to it as is a sense of judgment. Now, think for a moment. We do want a sense of judgment to be present, but we want our audience, our eager listeners, to really judge that we are, in fact, the ones who are driving the bus. We want them to use a positive judgment so that they will be able to connect and relate to what it is that we're talking about. But the problem is when the energy of attention blindsides you and you start to have fight or flight physical responses, very often that sense of judgment can move into a negative spiral. So you've got that going on at the same time. Plus, the third force that is present in public speaking scenarios is a fear of consequences. And I don't mean that people are either going to jump off the Zoom or walk out of the room or just shut down on you. No, it's more of a feeling of, how can I be going through this again? This is not my first time to the rodeo, yet I'm feeling all of these things. What is going on? How do I get out of this? I don't know what the tools are. I'm going down the same road. So you can see the combination of all of these forces is what public speaking anxiety is really all about. And I realize some people refer to it as nervousness or just a discomfort. It's the fear of the unknown. But now that you know what is really going on in these public speaking scenarios, you can begin to mitigate some of those physical responses. I said that it does begin with awareness, but ultimately you have to change behavior. You cannot change behavior just with pure willpower. You've got to replace this behavior with alternate physical behavior. So you have to retrain your body. You have to rely on your body to be able to generate that forward momentum, that confidence that you need in moments when you need it the most. So yes, good preparation definitely helps. So I want you to be aware that all of the concepts that I'm talking about here today are very simple. They're very simple to understand. However, the difficulty is in the execution. So I don't want you to wait until that crisis moment to be able to reach around and figure out where these tools are. You have to become accustomed to utilizing them so you know where to reach for them, how to access them in those moments when you need to course correct. So the two physical tools that I want you to become aware of, and I do want you to practice, are number one, deliberate breathing, and number two, coordinated gestures. So what do we mean by deliberate breathing? Well, many people over the years have actually said to me, I'm not really sure, Paul, if I actually breathe while I'm speaking. I'm really not aware of it. And I realize breathing is something we do even when we're asleep. Why should we have to focus on it? Well, when you're having that fight or flight response, one of the hits to the body, being surprised, is a tightening up of your core. Well, that's where your voice begins. So if you are feeling like you're having those shaky starts, it's because of a lack of vocal fuel. It's because you're not putting enough air underneath your voice. Now that's why it happens. That's some of the physical aspect of speech, the sense of speech being a full body expression. But it also gives you confidence. It gives you a sense of being grounded at a time when you don't necessarily feel grounded, where your mind is moving in so many different directions all at once, where all of those forces are coming at you. One of the best things that you can do is to take a nice deep breath, hold it for a moment, and then use it for speech. If you're not aware of how important your breathing is in speech at any moment, please become more aware. So I want you to try this exercise right now here in the webinar. This is an exercise I give to many of my clients who are really experiencing that anticipation, that anxiety anticipation of the moment coming up. So when you start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, I want you to use this exercise to focus on your breathing. You can do this prior to you coming into the room or coming onto the Zoom, or you can even do it either with your microphone on mute or do it very, very softly where others won't necessarily hear you. And that is, you take a deep breath in, and I want everyone to do this right now. When you breathe in, hold the breath. Don't let any of it out of your nose or your mouth. Hold your breath for a moment and then slowly exhale. Until all of the air is out of your lungs. Resist the urge to breathe in right away. Notice that you're in control. You are in control of how quickly you then inhale. It's as if you're sitting at the bottom of a nice, calm pool of water, and then slowly rise to the surface, taking a nice, easy, welcome breath of air. So let's try the exercise again. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Now slowly breathe out. Resist the urge. And now rise to the surface with another deep breath and repeat. Not only will this make you feel so much more peaceful in those moments where anxiety could be overwhelming you, but it will also remind your body of the importance of breathing for speech. You will be focusing on your breathing, and there's a good chance that you will then utilize that as you go into that presentation mode. So you need to have these tools available when all of those forces are coming at you. You need something to be able to push back with. And I know what this moment feels like because we have all been there. Now, the other thing that you can do along with your breathing is to coordinate your gestures. You get to choose which words your gestures fall on. So right in the beginning, in that opening moment, when you're standing in the vacuum of silence, if you're able to not only take a deliberate breath, but then coordinate a gesture to go along with it, yes, it will look like you are speaking with commitment, but even more importantly, it will feel like you are grounded in your body. A very important fact, very important tools to have ready in that moment. Because if you can get through the first 15 or 20 seconds where most people stumble and have a shaky start, you can really take off from there. So these are two tools that I definitely want you to utilize when you're in a public speaking scenario. Let me give you an example of what I mean by a coordinated gesture. What we're going to do is take a deep breath in, hold it for a moment, and then I just simply want you to say these words utilizing this gesture. I call this gesture the authentic. Both hands coming in and lightly touching your collarbone. And I want you to say this. Take the breath, hold it. I have learned so much. Now you try it. Take a nice breath. Hold it. Gesture on the word I. I have learned so much. Again, not only will it project that authenticity, but it will make you feel more confident. It's a good start to you beginning that public speaking presentation. Use it for confidence. So let's move on to being more clear. What it feels like, why it happens, and what you can do to get better at it. So what it feels like is as if you are throwing shots against the wall, but you're just not hitting the mark. It can often feel like you're circling around the topic because there is so much to talk about. After all, you've got to give everybody framing and context that you never really get to convey what the essential message is. It can feel like you need to talk faster in order to keep everybody's interest. You need to speak louder so that everyone can really hear you. Or you need to repeat things over and over and over so that people even begin to connect. And that's what it feels like when either you have lost your audience, you've never actually gained them, or you suddenly feel them slipping away. So why does it happen? There's a couple of reasons. The major ones are, very often in presentations, we overstuff. There are things that we think are really vitally important, and we want to make sure as the expert that we are covering all of the ground and we are proving our level of expertise. Then again, it could be that we don't have a really firm, solid template to utilize so that we go from missing the mark consistently to hitting the bullseye just about every time. Regardless of the subject matter, this template will fit so many different scenarios. I refer to it as a vertical unfolding. And what it is a step-by-step process that utilizes many of the things that I've learned about listening behaviors. So let me show you in its entirety what the vertical unfolding looks like. You start with step number 1. You state your bumper sticker right in the beginning. Number 2, you pause for the unspoken question. Number 3, you name your 3 buckets. Number 4, you unpack your buckets. And number 5, you close the loop. There you have it, the 5-step process to the template I refer to as the vertical unfolding. In order to understand the importance of the template I call the vertical unfolding, you need to know a few things about listening behaviors. The way that we process information when we're listening to someone speak it is different from the way we process when we're reading. For instance, if you were to write out a concept or an idea that you wanted to convey to me, I would very easily, upon reading it, understand one reason leads to another reason, leads to another reason, leads to a conclusion. Pretty simple. I refer to that as a horizontal train of thought. But when we are listening to someone speak, this horizontal train of thought has to be flipped up and made vertical. In other words, what was the conclusion in the horizontal train of thought now has to be at the top of the pyramid, the vertical unfolding, moving down. So the conclusion, then you have your 3 supportive reasons, and that will lead you to being able to go into some more of the details. Again, it's like a pyramid. It's a vertical unfolding that begins with your conclusion, followed by your 3 supportive reasons, additional information after that, and that's how it fans out. So this is a matter of leveraging listening behaviors. So it doesn't have so much to do, clarity doesn't have so much to do with you being clear as it does with the way that your listeners need to hear it. You've got to understand that and leverage it because it makes things a lot simpler. We like to have an easy roadmap of anticipation, which I'll explain as we go step by step through the vertical unfolding. So, step number 1, you've got to state your bumper sticker. Fair enough, Paul, but what's a bumper sticker? Some of you might refer to a bumper sticker as the title or the headline of what it is that you're talking about, but it goes even further than that. Because in my experience, when I would ask clients, business people, to give me the headline or give me the title of their presentation, they would give me something really long-winded. And in order to shorten them up, because brevity is such a big part of clarity, I would say, no. Give me your bumper sticker, only long enough to fit on the back of a car bumper, which would mean trimming out a lot of the fluff words until you get to a very bold statement. Now, I say state your bumper sticker as step number one, because when you think about the forces that are at work, it's not the easiest thing in the world to be so bold right in the beginning of a presentation. What's interesting, too, about a bumper sticker is that it's not necessarily purely informational. It is a perspective. It is an opinion, but it does project commitment to the words that you're speaking. Let me give you for instance. You tell me what the difference is between this opening, the first one, and the second one. What I think I'd like to talk to you about here today is an experience I had in being a leader. Okay, fair enough. That was a fairly innocuous beginning to a presentation. But what if you said this instead? When it comes to leadership, you've got to start small. There's a difference in the delivery. Do you see that a bumper sticker has my opinion? It has my perspective. It's not universally known or accepted that with leadership you have to start small, but in my opinion, yes, that's what you have to do. You have to start small. Now, a bumper sticker is such a bold phrase right in the beginning that you can probably expect, because you've just experienced it, that you're wondering how, what, or why. And that's what brings us to step number 2. And I write it in here because it is as important as delivering your bumper sticker. And that is pause for that unspoken question. Because everyone is thinking to themselves, what do you mean by you have to start small, Paul? Or how do you start small? Or why should I start small? They're not going to say it, but you have to give room for it to be there. And this has to do with listening behaviors. What you're doing is you are allowing for process time. You are allowing for the listener's curiosity to be piqued, so they want to hear more. That is the pause for the unspoken question. Number 3, we go to your supportive reasons. Remember when we just moments ago spoke about when you read, it's reason, conclusion. Well, the rule of 3 still exists and is very prevalent and is a preference. It is a listening bias. If you give me 2 options, you're shortchanging me. You give me 4 options, you're overwhelming me. Try to keep it to 3. These are your 3 supportive reasons. Now, I call them buckets because I'm acknowledging, as you should, that there's some depth in those buckets. There are some things that we're going to pull out. But you're naming your buckets. And the reason I do this is because there's quite a temptation after you've delivered your bumper sticker, then you've paused for the unspoken question to just want to dive right into one of your reasons and give me all the details. At that point, once again, you've probably lost me as a listener. So what I want you to do is imagine that these are 3 buckets, your 3 most important things that you want to get across. And just imagine that there's a piece of duct tape over the front of your bucket, and with a Sharpie, you wrote down a very simple name on that bucket, as if whatever was in that bucket you had to remember generally what it is, and so that everybody else would know what was in that bucket too. Think of it that way. So you have to name your 3 buckets. For instance, if my bumper sticker is, what I've learned about leadership is, you've got to start small. Then I would pause for that unspoken question and follow it up with the naming of my buckets. You have to learn from others. You have to ask for help. And then you've got to build trust. So you can see that I've named my buckets. Learn from others, ask for help, build trust. That's what I call the naming of the buckets. And there's a reason for that as well. Not only is it leveraging the rule of 3, but I've utilized coordinated gesturing. I've placed my buckets at the same time that I'm naming them. Therefore, for those who process in a visual way, they realize that bucket number 1 is right here. Bucket number 2 is right here, and bucket number 3 over here. This gives me the added advantage of being able to return to one of the buckets with an idea or maybe some congruent information that I either left out or suddenly saw an association to that bucket with. I'm able to then reinsert without feeling like I've misstepped. I can just go and do it, and people will follow because of their listening behaviors. The next step, step number 4 in the vertical unfolding, is to unpack your buckets. Yes, at this point now you get to go back and say, when it comes to learning from others, you've got to do this. Or when it comes to learning from others, I experienced this. Or when it comes to learning from others, let me give you an example of what that experience was like. So you can see I'm beginning to unpack that bucket. When we go to bucket number 2, which is ask for help, I've never really been good. I've always wanted to go it alone. But I learned some of the most valuable lessons by being able to ask people for the help, for them being able to help me with whatever weaknesses I recognized in my ability to connect with and ultimately lead others. And then you go to bucket number 3, building trust. First of all, you've got to show up. And second of all, you have to be consistent in your approach and in your responses. So you can see that you begin to unpack the buckets. And this can go into a lot of additional detail if you like. That's step number 4. Step number 5, you have to make sure that you close the loop. This is so vitally important because we need to know that you have completed, that you have closed that circle of satisfaction, that circle of listening satisfaction. So by closing the loop, you simply state or paraphrase your bumper sticker. In other words, and that's the reason why, when it comes to leadership, you've got to start small. It gives us a sense of listening satisfaction. So, you can see that by understanding listening behaviors, the approach to gaining more clarity becomes a little bit easier. And this is a template that can be utilized over and over and over again. Your bumper stickers will change based on the content that you're speaking about, but individuals' listening behaviors will not. The vertical unfolding template doesn't just aid your clarity when it comes to presentations. You can apply this to contributing in a meeting scenario, or if you are at a networking event, storytelling of any kind, often associated with job interviews, also sales calls. Because remember, people listen. They have a certain listening behavior, a certain listening bias. You might as well leverage it. But it has additional benefits as well. Whenever you're talking to, in particular, talking up or talking down, you see, when you're talking to your superiors and you are sharing information, in the course of that individual or that group of individuals' day, you're not the only person they're hearing from. Therefore, by utilizing this vertical unfolding, you are giving them the major takeaway and then the 3 reasons that support it. At that point, you have to then be prepared to allow the unpacking to only occur upon request. Upon hearing what your buckets are, whoever's listening to you may decide that they only want to hear about one particular supportive reason that aids your perspective. So it really helps them to be able to compartmentalize all of the information that they're receiving on a daily basis. This is also a really good approach when you're speaking to the board. Again, because of the amount of information, because of the amount of concepts that are usually coming across their desks that they have to listen and process, this will really position you as being someone who speaks with clarity. Also, the advantage of speaking to your direct reports. The overall message comes through. Yes, there are important details, but in terms of understanding the overall structure, you're giving it to everyone in a very, very clear package. So now we've covered dealing with the fear, what it feels like, why it happens, and what you can do to be able to deal with it. We've also covered how to become more clear, what it feels like when you don't have that clarity, why, very often why that does happen, and then what you can do to aid yourself in terms of that clarity. And really, overall, we're looking to build confidence when the stakes are high. Because when all of these forces are at work and we deem that this particular communication that we're having has importance, whether it's in front of a large group or in front of just one very important person, suddenly our speech technique is on display. So you want to make sure that you are reaching for these tools and are familiar with them on a daily basis. Expecting yourself to be able to utilize them as you should and as you could in those moments is asking a little too much. Remember, the concepts are simple, but the execution is hard. Let's do a quick review of some of the concepts we've covered here today, and at the same time, let's have a little bit of a poll. I've put together a list of the top 10 concepts that we have discussed here today. What I'd like each of you to do is to indicate which 3 resonated the most with you. We'll start with number 1, authenticity and trust, which obviously leads to persuasion. Number 2, the vacuum of silence, that feeling we've all encountered when it's our job to paddle the boat and move things forward. Number 3, the energy of attention. Oh, now I have a name for what that feels like, and we do all know what that feels like. Deliberate breathing, one of the essential physical lifelines that you have to be able to mitigate some of the physical responses that you may be experiencing due to public speaking anxiety. Coordinated gestures, always a good way to ground yourself in those moments when you might feel less than grounded. The vertical unfolding, the template that I recommend that you use for clarity. It also has a lot of applications in quite a few different scenarios. Bumper stickers. Boy, we love to hear that bumper sticker. Not just the information or the title, but our perspective. And yes, bumper stickers are bold. Next, we have the 3 buckets. Leveraging that rule of 3 that everyone likes to hear. Calling them buckets, naming them buckets, is good because there can be a lot of information in each one of those buckets. Listening satisfaction, the idea of starting bold, closing the loop, giving everybody the piquing their curiosity, also creating a roadmap of anticipation, aiding their discovery, and then making a complete package, therefore leading to listening satisfaction. And finally, talking up and down, utilizing this clarity to be able to really confidently speak when the stakes are high, either to your direct reports or to your supervisors. So please indicate which of the 3 out of the 10 that you see here resonates the most with you. As an attendee of this webinar, you should have already received your PDF copy of my book, Better Business Speech. If for whatever reason you don't have that, please check out the link in comments and in the chat, and you'll be able to download the copy of Better Business Speech. And in this, we cover quite a few things. There are 14 chapters altogether: meeting challenges, presentations, networking, how to utilize body language, habit-changing shortcuts, executive presence. And as we scroll past the introduction, you'll see that each chapter does have a video preview of between 2 and 3.5 minutes. At that point, you can make a decision whether you want to deep dive into that particular chapter. For instance, with Chapter 1, Meeting Challenges, I offer up 3 different challenges and 2 techniques that I have seen work, that are proven to work, to be able to overcome that particular challenge. So every chapter is a little bit different, has a lot of different information, many of the things that you've heard here today, but it elaborates even more on it. So I want to make sure that you know you don't have to read the book or peruse through the book in any kind of chronological order. I would suggest going to the table of contents. If something looks interesting to you, watch the video preview and then decide to take that deep dive. Thank you for the opportunity to share this important content with you here today. My hope is that you will continue on this journey to becoming a more confident speaker when the stakes are high. I look forward to the next time.